welcome to our third production for the Summit Talent Roadmap podcast here, where we interview job seekers that have been on the market or are currently on the market, and they are able to share their stories on how they've been able to navigate the job search, how they network, and just creative ideas on how they landed their role. Today I have with me none other than Misty Kluesner. If you don't know Misty, she's very active on LinkedIn around design themes, Figma, education, and EdTech. We connected earlier this year and have been in touch around her story, and we're going to capture it today. So without further ado, Misty, you can introduce yourself and maybe share your story about EdTech to community manager, and take it from here.
Yeah. Hi, all. So Misty Kluesner. So I transitioned this past year from a classroom teacher, education, to becoming the manager of community engagement and facilitation engagement for an education nonprofit called Teaching Lab. And to say it was a long journey is not a lie. I started my transition journey where I was like serious about it probably 2 years ago, around there. And it definitely had some, I'd say, more valleys than peaks in that journey. It was definitely tough to continue going on. But one of the things that I think really helped me with that journey was connecting with people like Henry and other people that really know how to understand that market and how to work through those tough spots. So it was definitely every chapter of it was an iteration, right? So I think back to that first resume I was pushing out. It was a Canva resume, which is what you're not supposed to do. It looked very pretty, but it had no information. I remember when I pushed that out, I actually thought I was going to be the unicorn, because my very first thing I applied for was a kind of like an ed community manager for Apple. And I ended up being one of the finalists. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be that person that, first job I applied to again. I was the bridesmaid, didn't get it. But I thought, okay, well, if I can get Apple right out of the bat, that's, this should be easy peasy, because this was in March. Figured I wouldn't be going back in the classroom in the fall. I was wrong. And so definitely, I kept working through it. I started finding people that knew what they were talking about online. LinkedIn was kind of my go-to to find those resources and connect with those people, and started building out a better resume. The resume I have now is night and day different than even my first resume that was not a Canva resume. And then I also learned how to draft better cover letters. I learned how to really connect with the people in the industry I wanted to go into, and then learn that maybe that wasn't the industry I wanted to go into. So even pivoting, what my adventure was going to be as I learned more about it. But I would say single-handedly what I think really helped me get the role that I have now is being open to those smaller opportunities between when I started looking and now. I did a lot of freelance and contract work. And yes, I was busy because I was still teaching, being a mom, still job hunting, but that contract work and those freelance gigs are really what allowed me to build up my resume and show that I was more than a classroom teacher, because unless you are a classroom teacher, you just don't know what classroom teachers are capable of, right? You just don't understand what goes into that. So it's being able to show how those skills can transfer over, because I had other things that showed, hey, all these skills I had as a classroom teacher, look, I can still do these amazing things in the language that you understand. And also having those, tangible artifacts to put in my portfolio. So when I did want to direct people to my portfolio, they saw things that were geared to different, age groups, different audiences. And so I think that really helped to showcase my abilities to the people that I was applying to. But yeah, it's being open to that, right? Because it's really hard to say yes to another thing, or even finding those opportunities. One of the opportunities that I got was actually through a program that I had participated in as a teacher back in 2016. And they asked me to be an assistant director for that program now for the current group of teachers coming in. And the minute you put assistant director on your resume, it looks really good. And I honestly think that is what helped me get a lot of the interviews I got after that point, because again, right, it's just those titles, those words that really helps you to kind of stand out above everyone else. So, I think that was the biggest thing, is connecting with people, figuring out what you should be doing, hopefully before you figure out the hard way and waste a lot of time, because time is the thing that none of us have. And also those people lift you up, right? I know when I was low or I was frustrated, I would find someone that would help, boost me up, help me remember that hey, this was not the one, but maybe it's not supposed to be the one, right? Like and honestly, like where I am now, I'm so happy that I ended up here. An amazing manager, an amazing culture, everything that was on my checklist for a job, I have. So like in hindsight, right? Some of those rejections along the way, right? That whole like when a door closes, a window opens, like doesn't make you feel good in the moment, but in hindsight, you're like, oh yeah, that was kind of true. So, yeah, but it was a long journey, and there was a lot of learning, and I hope no one else has to look for 2 years. And I was lucky; I had another job, right? So like it wasn't like I was trying to pay the bills or anything, but that's why I couldn't leave teaching because I had bills to pay. And it's hard, right? Like my mental health took a hit. I was on antidepressants and all of that, but chugged along, made it through, and it's much shinier and happier on the other side.
Yeah. Gosh, so many questions. And I'm trying to remember everything that I've captured. But first and foremost, congratulations. 2 years
Thank
is
you.
like the amount of time some folks put in to train for a marathon or an endurance event. And it takes a lot of, I'll just say discipline, systems, really bad days where you don't want to show up, but you have to. And I think just cultivating that mindset, and this goes for anything long term, right? I'm really not the best at showing up every day, but if I do a little bit, it does make me feel better at the end of the night before I'm not thinking about it as I'm going to sleep.
Yes.
So I wanted to share that because your journey, again, I didn't know it was 2 years. I thought it was like 8 months, but that's hats off to you for staying on path for so long. Now you get to share the story. Second thing, I had a Canva resume as well. Thought I was going to be the unicorn. Failed miserably, right? So we have that in common. And then one thing that stood out to me that you mentioned up front was LinkedIn, and then the community of folks you surround yourself with. I guess, yes, we can dive into the whole 5 people you surround yourself with as we become, but that's besides the fact. I think when people think of networking, they think of, I have to reach out to 5 people per day and pitch them. But I'm going to go out on a limb and assume you may have had a handful of folks that you trusted and they were willing to help you pro bono to where you could get a listening ear or someone to kind of be a sounding board and just one, release the frustration, 2, get some feedback, and 3, get some rest, go back at the next day. Is that accurate? Do you have a small group of folks?
Yeah,
or a large group of folks?
yeah, and a big part of it is too, right? So like with LinkedIn, it's scary at first, and when you first go on there, none of like the algorithm doesn't know you, doesn't understand you, so it's showing you all the influencers and the people that are the snake oil salesmen and all of that, right? But especially with the transitioning teacher community, because it is such a big community right now, there's a lot of people out there that are trying to capitalize it that maybe don't really know what they're doing. So I just started to, a big part of it was looking at the content people were creating and paying attention to that. And you start to see like who actually can back up what they're saying. And you really start to realize like, okay, these are the resources that I really want to dive into. And there are people out there that are offering amazing things for free, right? And there's, or at least at a rate that like I can afford, I can get enough of a tidbit from it to try it out. And then, a big part of it too is I just started making content. And like talking on LinkedIn, because once you start creating content, then people want to start interacting with you too. And I actually got some freelance roles because of the content I created. They reached out to me. But yeah, it's scary at first, right? Like, oh, I gotta put myself out there. And when you first put stuff out there, no one interacts with it and you feel like you're a failure. But eventually, right, like momentum builds, and you start to see the same people showing up on your feed. You start to build those connections. And then, when you ask some, I would ask one of my, new connections to take a peek at my resume. For example, when I knew I was going to be applying for a community engagement role, I had connected with a recently transitioned teacher who is now a community engagement manager with Adobe. And I asked her to look at my resume. Hey, could you look at this and give me feedback? And because of that amazingness from my network, right, I now had. And I even asked her, what do you do in your role? What are the things that they look for? So that way I had that information in the back of my mind when I went into interviews. So definitely taking advantage of the people that are there to help. But also I will add on LinkedIn is to be wary of the people that just want to make a buck, because those also exist. So it's, that whole critical eye in social media.
Right, right. Yeah, it's any given day, you're going to get the best or the worst of LinkedIn. And
Exactly.
I've actually started, and to your point, as I'm following certain folks, because maybe one of their posts really intrigued me, and then their follow-up posts are not necessarily as, I wouldn't say effective, but not as meaningful to me. I just unfollow them immediately. And I think that goes for anyone, right? If you're seeing great stuff consistently from someone and it's magnetic and it's like, wow, I need this person or this solution in my life, then you start commenting, then you start engaging, right? Because you don't necessarily
Yep.
want to go right into the DM and say, hey, look at my resume. I think your methodology was, wow, you have something to offer. You've done what I've done. And that person who worked at Adobe was more than happy to give you that same advice because just by the way you approach them, it sounded like you had been engaging or creating content
Yeah.
or learning about them in general, right? And you only needed one to look at your resume. You don't need 10 people that are, resume influencers, so on and so forth. So that's a great point. I think sometimes folks misconstrue, again, the networking piece as get into it's not sales, right? It's really not. You're trying to build lifelong relationships because a few years from now, we may have another follow up to this conversation. And this is like, well, I helped 3 or 4 people transition into, community management. You just never know. I have one thought I need to backtrack on because I know folks are going to
Okay.
want to know the freelancing piece. How did you get that started? Logos, which platforms, pricing. How do you solve for all that to get some of that specific experience at? The associate director, yeah, you're right. It's a pretty hefty title. I need one of those on
It,
mine.
it
So,
it looks nice,
yeah.
right? So that was just all because the person that they had decided to be their director purposely actually dropped my name because we had been in a program together. So again,
Oh,
networking, right?
great.
It was a relationship I had never expected anything out of, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
someone had posted recently on LinkedIn about this, about how that's all about how it works, right? You put out, you connect with people, but you don't expect it to be transactional. But if you go
Mm-hmm.
into it with that genuine, desire to just have that relationship and have that connection, you're going to reap the
Mm-hmm.
benefits at some point later on. But if you go in
Right.
expecting that, then you just tainted that relationship from the get go, right? So yeah, so she
Mm-hmm.
had just ended up actually purposely requesting me to be her assistant director, and they reached
Wow.
out to me with a couple of other freelancing roles. I got 2 contract roles from again other connections I'd had previously. One was
Mm.
a person I knew previously who started her own company and so wanted some extra help over the summer. So did work with her. I honestly had no idea what to charge. Luckily, she, liked me. She knew me, and so therefore she had me start at a fair rate. Like she totally could have taken advantage, right? But that also gave me an
Mm-hmm.
idea of what my starting rate for contract work would be. Another one was through the County
Right.
Office of Education. Again, was a teacher I used to work with, and now she was at the County Office of Ed. Knew that I had the skills she needed, and so tapped me for that. And then I think the
Mm-hmm.
one that I'm doing right now is I run the social media marketing for a small curriculum company. And she reached out to me just because of the stuff she saw me creating on LinkedIn for my own account, and
Wow.
wanted that for her. So all of it was organic, and I'm very lucky. It doesn't usually work that way.
Mm-hmm.
But it
Right.
all started because of, just having skills and letting people know what those skills were. So
Mm-hmm.
when I was a teacher, I was a technology coach for a long time, and I also have a graphic arts background. So I
Yeah.
was very comfortable, right, with Adobe. I use Adobe Express all the time. And if you're in education, Adobe Express and Canva are free for educators, right? So there's no excuse to not get
Mm-hmm.
in there, play around, dive in, and learn how to just start creating. And so because I had those skills, they knew that, right, I could transfer them over to other areas as well. And then just with tech in general, like I'm not scared to learn new tech. And so when someone
Right.
presents a new technology tool at me, I
Mm-hmm.
generally can figure it out or go to YouTube and have YouTube help me figure it out.
Right. Right. Or Chat GPT nowadays. Well, maybe not for
Oh, yeah.
design and stuff, but
Yeah.
for other things. So to your point about the freelancing and pricing piece, I have a similar story. I got brought on board as a contractor at Country. This is my first in-house technical recruiter role. I thought I was, well versed in the engineering space because I was actually pursuing a degree in software engineering at the time. And when they brought me on board, I realized after the fact it was less risky to bring me on as a contractor. I had no idea what that even meant. They were that my manager at the time offered me an hourly that was twice the amount I ever made in my life. So obviously I said, wow, this is amazing. And it was a 3-month contract. And at the end of the 3 months, I didn't hire anyone. But I loved it so much. I said, hey, can I stay on board? I'll quit the Army Reserves and I'll quit school to like work for you all full time. And that happened. It happened over a course of 6 months. But then I realized after the fact, businesses will hire freelancers and contractors with less risk, right? There's no benefits involved, which is typically 30 to 40% on top of the salary, right? For healthcare,
Yep.
medical, dental, vision, and then whatever other perks you add on top. So when folks look at a salary or a company look at a salary, say, okay, Misty 100K, Misty's actually going to receive from us 140K with just the benefits. And then the annual bonus, let's say it's on 20%, that's 160K off of the books. So I love the freelancing route and that you've taken and the whole network you built, because it seems like you just had this trifecta of a strategy, creating your own content, networking with past folks in events you've attended, and then creating your own, and then reaching out to them when they needed help or when you needed help, and just had everything just kind of follow through on their end. Like you didn't have to solve for everything at one point. You just kind of took the necessary steps,
Yeah.
one step at a time, and see where it took you. Right, just had a little bit of faith. So I love that.
That's
So
why it
crazy.
took 2 years, right? Because it took a while. Like it's a learning curve for sure. But I think also the part I also like tell people about the contracting stuff, right? I know when I first started looking, especially like, like my husband was very like wary because like coming from teaching, right? It's like the most secure, like it's a recession proof job. It's a you have like a great pension, all of this stuff, right? So it's a very secure role. And so going into anything, right, was like, okay, well, right away I'm giving up that security. And then when you
Right.
mentioned a contract role in his head, he was just like, oh gosh, contract, right? Oh, because I would be, but I kind of started explaining to him, like, well, I mean, look what's happening this past year. Like, just because you're actually an employee doesn't really mean anything anymore. Like,
Right.
there are people from Google that have
Right.
been there for 20 years that are losing their job, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I I kind of feel like yes, you don't get like the perks of like the benefits and the retirement and everything. However, I don't necessarily mean that going with a full-time employment means you have better job security, right? At this point in time and where
Yeah.
we are in the market. So if you have a way to get benefits through like another person, like I could have, yes, it would have cost us more money, but I could have gone on my husband's benefits for a time
Mm-hmm.
being. And yes, I don't need to contribute to retirement for 1 year. It wouldn't have been a deal breaker. Would I do that for a long time? No,
Mm-hmm.
but for 1 year to make that transition, like that would have been okay. So like I gradually was able to get him more open to that. I lucked out. I didn't have to go into a full-time contract role, but it was something that I was definitely being more open to, I would say, in the past 6 months, just because of where the market is.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a lot of companies are now starting to do because of everything, right? Like you said, that lower risk employment.
Yeah, and for some reason I just lost you here. I see a blank screen with an M
Oh
and okay, cool. It says recording continues smoothly, live video will return when the internet improves. So I'll
no!
just cut this all
Yay!
out. But anyhow, yeah, I agree 100%. I actually thinking back, that contract role offered so much more flexibility in
Mm-hmm.
terms of pay. And me as a person, I understood that X amount would go to taxes, but X amount I could write off. My all my computer peripherals, my MacBook, any tool that I was using. Let's say if it was a sourcing tool for recruiting or Asana for project management, I could then write off at the end of the year. So I was essentially buying my own suite of tools as a contractor, and I think I have some of these licenses still. I'm not too sure. But then when you go full time, all that's provided for you, but it's on the company database, so on and so forth. So I think both avenues have their benefits. But to your point, nowadays I don't see much of a difference, right? Unless the pay structure is astronomically different, and the benefits obviously you get as a full time employee. But to your point, I'm on my wife's state benefits now. We pay a little bit more, but it's almost the same experience. Like I go to the doctor maybe 3 times a year to do my labs to make sure everything's good, and that's about it. What do we? And then you got to think about what you're paying for, what your lifestyle looks like, right? So yeah, that was a great add-on there as far as hopping out to a spouse, or if you don't have a spouse, then other creative ways of getting benefits and whatnot. But goodness gracious, so what was it like to interview for your current role, get the offer, and think back on the 2-year journey? I kind of want to hear what those emotions or like in that
Um,
specific time period?
I will give, well, first thing I have to do is, and I told, it was so funny when I ended up chatting with the person that was like the head recruiter in charge of all the hiring at my current location. Like the first thing when I chatted with them is like, first props to you. Cause like how they, you hear all the horror stories about how everything's set up and how people are, how different recruiters and stuff are with jobs. And like, they were fabulous.
Nice.
They kept me in the loop all the time. But I remember while I was interviewing for this, I was getting close to the final interviews for another role too. And I was like, oh no, like what happens if I get a job offer with that one and this one, like what happens, right? Like how do I navigate that? So yeah, when I got the offer, I remember I was in my classroom after school and, right away I had to call my husband and be like, oh my gosh. And then it was okay, now I have to leave mid-year, right? So then the teacher guilt settles in. Because you're like, oh no, I have to, right? But I also knew like everyone that like was close to me knew at this point where I had been looking. So the only person I got grief from was HR. They tried to guilt trip me, and I'm like, well, like the rest of the world does not operate on a teacher's schedule. Like they hire all year round, not just in a 2-month window. So.
There's substitutes as well. There's staffing arrangements there.
And I was an elective teacher at that point, so it's not like a class of kids is going to be teacherless. Like they will find someone to fill that role. So, but yeah, it was just. But I think my last day was Friday, and then I started this role on Tuesday, and it was a whirlwind. But I also went from in my job I was commuting an hour each way, so like that time I get back now, I get to see my kid in the morning before he goes to school. I can actually drop him off. I actually get to go volunteer in his classroom. I was there for an hour today. So I still get like that part of my like teaching bucket gets filled because I'm helping out in my son's TK classroom. I get more sleep. I have time to exercise. And I have, right. Like the mental health, like I'm getting off my meds right now because of that. And then I get to walk the dogs every day. I live in a beautiful area that I now get to enjoy. Like it's been an amazing journey. Working remotely hasn't been an issue because of my role. I'm constantly in meetings, maybe too many meetings. So I definitely get my people fix every day. You're actually like looking for those times where you're like, oh, I actually have quiet work time. Okay, yay. Like I haven't been able to work at a coffee shop yet because I just have too many meetings and I don't want to be that person. But yeah, no, it's been great. And I think I still do some freelance work with EdTech companies where I get to do content creation and stuff like that. So I still get to keep my foot in that door. And what I love about this role is that I still, because of who I work with and the people that I'm the community manager with, they are in the classrooms and they are coaching teachers and stuff. So I still get to have a pulse on what education is doing and how it's going, but without all the added stress. And I also get to have I get to see what's happening across the entire country versus in my little silo that I had before.
Oh, wow. That must be really cool.
Yeah. So it's really cool to just kind of see what's happening and like where the innovation is starting to really take place and happen. And see that impact that we're having. So I like it because I feel like I was open to leaving education, but I'm happy I didn't because I still get to be immersed in that world. But it's like all the perks without all the stress and
yeah, that's the both worlds.
Yeah,
that's amazing. I remember when you first started. I remember when you announced the acceptance of the offer. I was like ecstatic because we had talked like 4 months before that. And then you posted, your first post was like, okay, I'm remote now. What type of gear should I get? I was the same way. What headphones, and then you showed a picture of your setup and I was like, man, I'm so proud. Like what an amazing moment to know that that's your workspace. And all this gear is free. One other quick question, I think, before we have to jump. I don't know if you have a hard stop, but when we first met, I had an intuition that you were in the tech and the systems, and we talked about organizing. We had talked about your playbook. How did you organize your journey from beginning? How did you iterate throughout? And what are you doing now to keep things kind of in a system to where you're not going crazy? I guess mostly for job seekers now, what would you suggest them to do on how to track jobs and all that stuff?
I mean, so originally I had used Excel and I had a spreadsheet and I tried to keep track of it that way. I got a little crazy. And then like Google folders. So I had a Google folder because, most of them are the same companies. So I had that. And so I just try to keep stuff there. Because one of the things I remember learning the hard way is that if you don't save the job description, it's not always there when you go to apply later, or if you do get an interview. So saving that is key, like even if it's copy and pasting it into a Google Doc. And then what I discovered since while I was looking, Teal showed up, and I feel like Teal is a great tool just for organizing, just because I could use their little extension to automatically save all the jobs. So just again, made it a bit more efficient, didn't have to save things. I think that was the biggest thing for that, was just organizing, like, what have you applied to? Who do you need to follow up with? I really wish LinkedIn would fix its message box system so I could actually keep track of my messages better, because that was like going back through that. And then I remember when I got your playbook, because I think I'd been like a year or so into it, and I looked at it, I was like, oh, this is all the stuff I had to figure out, and I wish I'd had this from day one. Like, this would have been great. So the playbook is amazing, because it just, like, from day one, you're like, oh, these are how it should be organized, and this is what I should have available, and this is what I should be thinking about. So that was kind of the main thing of that. And I just remember, like, I would just had a system of, like, I set up my job notifications. I think I had some in Indeed. I had some in LinkedIn. And then I would go in, and check just general job boards. I would do, like, keyword searches as well, because sometimes those would pop up just, like, from hashtags, right? If people didn't want to pay for the LinkedIn posting.
Smart.
And I just kind of started to build that into my schedule. I think I always did that, like, while I was drinking my coffee in the morning, and then I would do it again, like, after school, after the kids had left. And then I also had a network of people, right? Like, they knew what I was interested in, and I would have people tag me or send me job listings sometimes too, again, right? So that's what's great with, don't be shy about sharing, like, what you're looking for. So that way, because then people will tag you and they will share it with you. Nowadays, I'm a big fan of Google Calendar, just because it's, like, all in one spot. So I have Google Calendar, and I use the tasks, and I basically just put all the tasks on there, like the little, like, orange things, because I like to check things off, and then that way if I don't do it, I can move it to the next day. And then I kind of have, like, my paper one too, because that's how I keep track of, like, my freelance tasks and my personal life tasks, because they're not on my work calendar. So that's kind of, like, the thing that I've been using a lot. And then I'm a big sticky note person, but the problem with sticky notes is they get lost. So I learned how to use FigJam. So I love FigJam because it's my digital sticky pad, and I can't lose them. So I do that, like, when I was, like, planning, like, cover letters and stuff like that. So
it sounds like there isn't one strict and fast way to do it. Like, you can do Google Sheets with Google Docs with folders. You use Teal, job seeker playbooks, myself or anyone else that's out there. Sticky notes if you like pen and paper. I think for me, I'm constantly iterating how I do my tasks. I'm a Google Calendar fan as well. I had this app called BusyCal, which was fantastic. It migrated all my calendars and tasks, but it got too busy for me. I stopped using it, and I'm back to Google Cal again. The task section, I'm 100% fan as well. Drag and drop, so easy. So I guess for those listening out there, just find what works for you to keep you organized. And if it stops working for you, Google another solution and see if that works, and ask your friends, ask ChatGPT on what the best project management tools are out there. Because in a sense, the journey for your next job is a project, right? You have to treat it with certain love and care and parameters and deadlines, and using things like Asana or Monday, or at the bare bones, Google Sheets to kind of track things. There are templates out there that can help. So thanks for sharing that. We're almost at half an hour, and I don't want to keep you going, but any last tips for folks on the journey that we haven't discussed, and where can they find you on LinkedIn? How about that too?
I'm on LinkedIn under my name, Misty Kluesner. Feel free to reach out, any tips or even if you just need an empathetic ear. I know it's a slog out there right now. It's even, like, it feels like it's always worse than it was, like, a month ago. So hopefully we're going to be turning around soon. But I mean, I think the biggest things is just that network, but networking for the genuine relationships, not in the hopes that you're going to get something out of it, because those are the ones that really did end up helping me out later, was just people coming around later with ideas and offers. And again, like I said, don't be afraid of kind of creating your own opportunities, right? So if you're not getting what you want, but you have a little bit of bandwidth, even looking in your local community, right? Like, if you want to do data analytics, is there, like, a local, like, organization or a local company that you could work with, right? Just to get something on paper, just to get something on your resume, just to get something in your portfolio. Don't, and also if there's a good chance that they're not posting on LinkedIn, right? So like,
Right.
they're a good way to kind of build up that. So don't be afraid of like the smaller things to start to build up until you can get to, what that big piece you're looking for.
Love it. Thanks for your time, Misty. We'll definitely have version 2, 3, or 4 because we're both iterators. We'll see each other more often. But again, thanks for the knowledge. Thanks for the journey. I'm sure there's more to your story that we'll uncover next time. But till then, we'll see you later.